Hey, welcome to another Q&A for the San Francisco Independent Short Film Festival 2023. Hey, filmmakers.
Hello.
I'm Jason Waldos. I'm one of the programmers here at the festival, and we're lucky enough to have these filmmakers with us for the closing night program, 49 Miles, Bay Area Stories. Thanks, guys. Where are you calling from? Natalia and Christian, where are you guys calling from?
Los Angeles.
Hey, all right. Thanks for joining us. Megan, where are you located?
I'm tuning in from Santa Cruz.
Cool. Austin, are you there with us?
Yes, I am. I'm tuning in from Sonoma. So
Okay, good to have you. And last but not least, Alfredo, hi.
Hi everybody. I'm tuning in from San Francisco, so right here.
Right on. And you know what? Why don't you introduce yourself, Alfredo, since I'm on you, just your role in the film you're connected with.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to show my film with you guys, and I hope everyone has a chance to see it. But yeah, my name is Alfredo Torres. I'm originally from Costa Rica, born and raised there, and I moved to the Bay Area in 2019, and since then have been kind of living here. And my film is Jardines, which is a documentary about the displaced community meeting each other in Tijuana. And I was the director, producer, and editor for the film.
Great, thanks. Austin, how about you? Your film and your role.
uh my film is Imagine Me, and much like Alfredo, I was also the producer, director, and editor of my film, as many independent shorts are. Um yeah.
Cool. Megan, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Megan Martinez Goltz. My pronouns are they, them, and I was the director, editor, and sound recordist designer on the project. And my film is Historias de Cultura, Oaxaca and Santa Cruz. And I just want to share this because not many people catch it necessarily in the credits, but the entire film was filmed in Santa Cruz, California. I know sometimes folks are like, "Oh, that's beautiful. Mexico looks beautiful," but it's celebrating how people can bring culture with them wherever they land, and these folks are here in Santa Cruz.
Right on. Thanks for joining us. And hey, Natalia, Christian.
We're co-directors of the film, Natalia Vekic, Christian Bruno, and we also produced the film, wrote the film,
What's the film called?
and the film is called Creativity Explored.
No, it's called You
Sorry.
Always See Myself. It's a new title.
Well,
You Always See Myself, and it's about Creativity Explored, which is just right down the street from the Roxy, just about a block and a half away, that has disabled and neurodivergent adult artists who are making their way out of the pandemic after being shut down for a couple of years.
right on. Well, since we're on you guys, how'd this film come to be? I know you're from the Bay Area, lived in the Bay Area before, but you're in LA now.
Yeah.
So how'd you make this movie? How'd it start?
For years, Christian lived around the corner from Creativity Explored Studio, and we would go to their openings, buy the artwork, any holiday fairs that they had. And during the pandemic, we started talking to the people at Creativity Explored, and they had this great idea for wanting to do a fashion show. And the minute we heard that, we were so excited because the artists, many of them who've been coming to the studio for 30 years,
Mhm.
6 days a week during the pandemic, really had nowhere to go. And a lot of folks who go to Creativity Explored, sometimes their only means of communication is art. And so this was an opportunity for them to work together, still separately, to build the pieces that are part of the fashion show. And then they were going to be doing a fashion show at a museum. And so that got us really excited, just the visuals of it and telling the story about these profoundly talented people. Like, that's something that I don't want to get lost, is that these artists are so incredibly talented and expressive. And so it was really obvious how excited we were to be telling the story.
Yeah, it comes through. The runway show is one of my favorite parts too, scenes. But so, did you guys get like? Did you have a relationship with them, Christian, because you lived in the neighborhood, or did you go to the show, Natalia, and then you're like, this is a movie.
Well, I think part of it, as she said, it was like during the pandemic, we were, and I'm sure all of us here were the same. As soon as the pandemic came, it's like our kind of ability to like make documentaries was like suddenly challenged. You know, it's like we go into people's personal spaces and like, you know, make movies, and nobody wants that, you know. So I think we just kind of started like just kind of touching base with different organizations, like, well, what are they doing during the pandemic? And I think, you know, as the movie kind of expresses, when they had to shut down, it was like a big challenge for them to kind of keep the artists working in some way. And Clea, who is the curator at CE at the time, had kind of reached out to us, and she was just like, well, you know, we are doing this fashion show. It's just going to be a little bit challenging because for anybody who knows Creativity Explored, their studio is just this big buoyant place, and it was just at the time it was shut down, so it created a little bit of challenge, but also it gave us an opportunity to kind of show the joy of them coming back together, collaborating in this really, really rich and, of course, very visual way.
Yeah, yeah. And Megan, also, same question to you. How'd your movie start?
Yeah, so I think it really started similar to Natalia and Christian. It kind of was a response to the pandemic. When everything shut down, I had been working with this organization called Senderos, which is Spanish for pathways. And what they do is really help to create pathways for newcomers from the Latinx community to celebrate their culture through education of dance and music and art and things like that, so that they can, you know, still retain and celebrate who they are as they kind of adjust to life here in the States. And when everything shut down, their organization and the people they serve was really hit very hard because a lot of their community didn't have necessarily the access to a lot of the government resources. So I had kind of dig through my hard drive, and I had some footage, and I was like, oh, you know, let me like help to kind of get their story out now that we're living in this digital platform. And it really helped to strengthen our relationship, where, you know, we kind of made some films that were centering what they were working on. And then they kind of returned the question back to me, and they're like, well, what do you want to learn about? And I was like, I've always wanted to tap back into my own Mexican heritage and the food that comes with it. And they were like, let's make a food film. Like, let me introduce you to these women who are making this amazing dishes. And I got to, you know, see their whole process, from even, you know, drying the corn on the street to grinding it themselves, and how beautiful it is that they were able to create Oaxaca in their backyards. You know, they're these women are in their backyards and their driveways, and they're feeding their families and their community in a way that helps them heal during this kind of post-pandemic era that we're in, to access their traditions and share them with their community.
Yeah, yeah, it lends itself to the visual medium too, just like Christian and Talia is very colorful, very visual. Austin, you have the documentary about an artist as well. How'd your movie come to be?
Like, I guess in the vein of like documentary as a whole, it's primarily just luck.
You just discovered Madge making a hat and said, "Let me pull up my camera."
No, Madge is her dog. The hat maker is Lori Berliner,
Oh,
and
sorry about that.
no, it's the shop that she owns is Madge and Me.
I
and
see.
She is the me in that Madge. But
Like I said, you gotta forgive me for forgetting your films.
it's okay. I hardly remember it myself. Lori went to high school with my mom, and so my mom knows that I do documentaries, and she recommended that I reach out to Lori, and she said yes. And I got to learn all about her story of how she kind of went through kind of a midlife crisis after her husband had passed away, and she had always been crafty with clothes and sewing, but she wanted to hone that, and she decided to settle on hats.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. I love the you know, she said at the start, because her husband passed away, how does she live the rest of her life and in a more creative environment? And that resonated with me. I'm sure it could resonate with all the artists and filmmakers here. Alfredo, how about you? What was the inspiration for your movie? How did it get started?
Yeah, I think for me it was a lot of well, my background is in journalism, and so at the time I was very intrigued. I guess as a queer migrant myself, I was very intrigued about like what is the, what are the stories and the lives that lay at the intersection of migration and queerness. I think when we think of migration, oftentimes we just tend to lump people together in one just kind of package of other, right? It's like, oh, they're coming, but rarely do we speak about who they are and like the nuances of that. And so I think for me it was very important to like kind of unpack a little bit more the narrative and trying to understand like, what does it look like to be queer in this place, right? And kind of pushing a little bit our understanding of migration. Like most of the people on my film, I would say like 80% of the people on my film have been forcibly displaced. So like none of them really chose to be here or wanted to come to the US. They just so happened that this is like the place where they just feel them like could be safe at this moment in time. And so I think it was part of an intellectual pursuit, but also part of understanding, my own identity and sort of like, we move through the world as a consequence of under the lack of understanding of who we are and why we are who we are. And I think in my story, at least, like I think I was just very interested in like seeing and kind of archiving, right? Because I think the other thing about migrant stories and like and the overlap with queer stories is that like there's like a huge missing archive. Historically, like those stories had just been kind of gone under the radar and like have been told from a very specific angle. And so I think for me, it's just like reclaiming that archive, or like not reclaiming, but like recreating our archive and making sure that we start to put things on the record, specifically when it comes to like, not only like the sad stuff and like the trauma and pain and the violence, but also like the joy, the resilience that lays at the heart of this community, which is like the queer displaced community. So
Yeah, there's some joyous moments in your movie, made me cry as well. But how did you come to that specific, what do you call it, safe house, or how did you come to that? How did you get that place? How did you just develop a relationship with
Yeah,
that?
it was an ongoing relationship. I mean, I went to Tijuana multiple times throughout the year, and I think for me, it all started more again from like a more emotional curiosity, right? It's like, what does it mean to be queer and displaced, right? I think like queerness is already an identity that has been displaced from society. When you're also physically displaced, what does that look like? And I think in Tijuana, I visited several shelters and I spoke with mostly organizers and directors, and I think slowly like build the trust in this specific shelter for them to also open up a little bit more to some of the residents and whoever was willing to talk with me. Like it just became kind of a little bit of like, let's get to know each other. And at some point they were all on board to like make sure the stories got told. And so I think I just was granted an access that I didn't really think I would, because honestly that was not my intention originally. I wasn't really looking to make a film about a shelter, but it just so happened that the trust that we cultivated and the relationship that we still have, because we're still in touch, pretty much like every week we're like, I'm in touch with someone. So it just kind of
got pretty close. You got pretty close, which made for a very impressive story. Natalia and Christian too really get close to your subjects in the doc. It's really lovely to see and hear from them and see their artwork. How did you develop that relationship? What was your approach like to making this documentary?
Wow, it's funny. It's as Alfredo was talking, I was sort of thinking about the challenges we all have making nonfiction films, that we're telling other people's stories. We're also telling our own stories kind of in the midst of it, but people are trusting us with their stories, which I think is really, really fascinating. And I feel like we all have kind of a range. It's like Austin, like you're like almost like a childhood friend of your subject. It's like an interesting way of accessing somebody, where Alfredo and Megan, it seems like you're accessing people that you might not have had a relationship with before. And that's maybe a little bit similar for us. We're not part of that community, but we were very much kind of welcomed into the community, which was, I think, very exciting. And anybody who walks through the door, you are greeted by all the artists in this way that's really, they just treat you with such familiarity. A little bit of suspicion sometimes, especially when you have a camera, but we all have that experience as well. I think one of the biggest things for us, and maybe Natalia can talk about this too, was just you know, all of the artists there have a range of like disabilities, and some are visible, some are not, you know. And I think it became important for us to kind of not be like, oh, these are disabled artists, because in a way, as someone has said, you know, a lot of us, we range in so many different ways on different spectrums, let's say, you know, that it was important for us to not label them, and which created a big challenge for us in some ways, but also it felt like it made working with them a lot richer.
Mhm.
Do you have any thoughts about that, Natalia?
Yeah,
I mean,
Natalia, you want to add something?
I think we've done a lot of interviews with people over the years, and I think the main thing is that for me, as a writer and a filmmaker, just to be very observant about the space I'm in, the space I'm taking up, and to treat people with respect, and to really listen, and to really be aware of people's emotions and what also the artists wanted to talk about themselves, the work they wanted to show off, you know, the kind of the topics they wanted to talk about. And so I think it's really being open to the people that you're working with and interviewing and collaborating with, because ultimately that's what it is. It's a collaboration between you and the folks who are in the piece, and really showing people the time, respect, space. I think one of our biggest limitations with the film was clearly the pandemic, because we would have loved to have gone into people's homes and spent time with their families. I think that for me, that was like, would have been such a great thing, but we just did not have that ability at the time that we were filming. It was just too dangerous.
And,
So I think,
yeah. Well, I'm just curious too. You guys, you really got like they let you in their space while they're creating too. It seems like as artists they would be, you know, with the camera there. Did that interfere?
no, because I think you spend enough time just moving around people. And also when we're not, you know, when one of us is filming, like I'm usually the one walking around and just having conversations with people and just asking them without the camera on them, like, what are you working on? Can you tell me about it? And just like there are really simple ways of being respectful and having people talk to you. And I think the biggest thing, I think our energy is like, I'm a genuinely like I genuinely want to know whether the camera was here or not. Like I want to know how you make your work. I want to know what inspires artists. Like I am genuinely interested in human beings, which is why I'm drawn to writing and filmmaking. Like I love that idea of meeting people that I would maybe never meet and having this like brilliant moment of connection with them. Like,
Yeah.
and I really feel that. And when I feel it, I get a sense that other people are too. And that's kind of what you're chasing and what
Yeah.
you're working with.
Yeah, right on. Megan, you want to speak to this a little bit? The process of, you know, filming your subjects and capturing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for our team, I think the access that we had to these women, to these elders, was really a tribute to our producer, Helena Lana, who has been working closely with this organization for a long time, you know, volunteers on their board and things like that, and really had built a relationship of trust with these women for them to welcome us into their home and to also have like that safety. There's a part in the film that we had to cut because Maestra Fe, the first woman who cooks, she's talking about like when we cook, it is our way to resist. And she starts to cry and she asked us to cut. And we were so lucky to have our producer, Helen, there to kind of help tend to like all the emotional things that come up, because like, you know, I'm sure it's similar, Alfredo, in your story, like there's a lot of things that you have to say goodbye to when you migrate. And there's a lot of feelings that come up with that. And then, you know, there's this resilience and this aspect of like, well, how do you hold on to the parts that you love and figure out how to celebrate them in these new ways and in these new communities while mourning the things you had to leave behind. So I think it was really important that we had that element there, and that we also worked with a team of folks who were Spanish speaking Mexican American folks who were able to kind of like listen and give space, and like also understand like the cultural importance of like some things you're not supposed to touch and some things, you know, like are okay, and like, when all the chilies are on the fire, like it's gonna get spicy, so like take some space, so there was a lot of I think having the right team to also support these women who, some of them have never been on film before, some of them are just, like, we had to stop filming several times because they were like, you need to eat, and we're like, well, we're trying to get the shot, and they're like, no, like, vamos a comer, like, come on, like, sit and eat. So it was a little bit of having the right team to support
Yeah.
them as they're sharing with us. So I think that was really important for us.
Yeah, in all these films, the characters are very generous in sharing their lives. You guys, got incredibly close, which is amazing. All the characters are charming. Um, and for you, Megan, you said having the right team in place, right? Any other challenges besides, getting the right team and getting access to these people?
I think a challenge that was for us, again, like I was saying, like some of these women had never been on film before, so there was a lot of oh, we already made that part of the meal, and we're like, oh, well, we didn't catch that, like, can you re-say it? And they're like, well, I already said it, and we're like, well, the camera wasn't on, so it's also like there's a generational difference, right? It's like, how can you tell your elders, like, do it again? They're like, no, we did it already. And then we kind of had to like pick and choose. Okay, some things we're not going to capture, we'll just ask them to say, and some things like you don't necessarily need to capture because you can kind of feel it out. So it's kind of like a delicate dance with trying to, set aside like my cinematic editor director mindset and just be like also in a place of understanding and respect, like that they're gifting me this information and that I can only absorb so much. And we tried really hard to be intentional about making it feel very observational, as if we're children in the kitchen observing people. It's like, you're not going to catch every single thing every time. That's why you have to go back and do
Yeah.
it again. And it's a practice, and I think that kind of worked into the story, is just like, how do you be patient with not having everything, you know?
Yeah, I like the analogy of being, the grandchild in the kitchen watching, or the kid in the kitchen watching them cook. Alfredo, some challenges for you. I mean, how long did it take you, and getting close to these people? I mean, it's a really emotional story. Uh, Tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure, probably trust was the biggest one. I think again, like it's just making sure, and I'm sure like my, filmmakers in the room also understand too, is like, yeah, as we said, like these people are trusting us with their stories, with their lives, and it's just like, how to, um, I guess like how to best serve their story, without trying to serve just a narrative. I think it's like it's very hard, as Megan is saying, right? It's like sometimes there's like a lot of moments that you want to include in the film, but for some reason it just doesn't feel right, or you just don't want, like I think it just comes with a lot of decisions. And I think like the trust that I was giving is also part of this like constant process of like I am trusting them too. Part of what made the film, I guess like the biggest challenge was trust, and part of what made it also like the most beautiful aspect of the film for me was that like it was as much them sharing as it was me. Like I came in with like ideas, but like nothing was like said. And like I talked to them, like discuss like my insecurities, my fears about the project, and then they would
Mm.
like give me their own feedback. And so I think like, we're both being vulnerable in a really beautiful way, I think. And like, of course, their stories are the ones that come to the forefront, but I think I'm happy that there was like a lot of space to talk and to also just get to know each other outside of camera. I think like I just spent a good amount of time just like hanging out without a camera. Like usually like the first few times that I came, like I didn't even have the camera the first time, and then like the second time I would just make space like a whole day almost just to kind of talk about the ideas for the project. What do they think? What they, who doesn't want to be on it? Like how do we deal with that? And I think doing that work pre starting shooting, I think really helped, because then the moment when we picked up the camera, like people knew what to expect, and then they were also excited to share too.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah.
Natalia, Christian, I mean, you said filming during the pandemic was challenging, but any other challenges? And I do want to just slip in here. I really love your animated, using their artwork to animate transitions or to display their artwork. And I wanted to ask, just as a filmmaker, fellow filmmaker, was it hard to incorporate their artwork? I'm so glad you did. Thank goodness you did, because it makes the movie all that much better.
Oh my God, it was like there's too much artwork to include. That's the
That
it's like this.
was part of the
Also
just
visual
deciding
and-
which ones.
Yeah, it's also visual, and there's just almost too much to incorporate. So there is a bit of a balance between having them represent themselves, but also for a lot of them, the work is who they are. So that's a very important element. And some of the animations that appear in the film, they made those, so there is much collaborators on the film.
Like if the background, again, I watched these a long time ago. There's the church animation one with the background. Is
So
that
that's really beautiful. That's Joseph Amaloyo, and he does a lot of fashion, and he does watercolors. He just gave me his card last time I saw him.
If you guys
I'm
are
gonna
looking
need to
for
pass it on
you're looking
during
for an
the
outfit,
festival.
yeah.
I think it's just like it's amazing, because I think for that piece, like I think the biggest challenge is we're making a short, and really what we want to make is a feature. It's just like as I mentioned, I would love to follow them in their home lives and see a bigger swath of what they're working on, they're doing. And I think because we knew certain people would be in fashion show, we wanted to track them throughout the film. So there are all these artists, and at some point you have to make a decision. There are already a lot of artists in it, and at some point you need to make a decision of who you can't include, and that was a really difficult decision.
so? Sorry, but so did you guys start out saying we're making a short, or you just let the material make it a short? Like, why didn't you make a feature?
Because, well, for us, we knew we were making a short financially. Like, we just knew that we were going to be making a short, and we also knew that still when we were filming it, like in terms of the pandemic, it would just be really hard to make a feature for all the reasons that I mentioned. And so, but I think seeing it now, there's just a sense of like, I think for the challenge for me is like, I feel like we barely scratched the surface, and I want to go deeper, and I want to.
That's why I asked. It feels like it could be a feature. I mean, I think you got enough material, or
Also, some of the folks, like, I mean, just speaking about filmmaking and access, some of the folks lived in group homes. Like, the height of the pandemic, you're not going to get into the group home. There are just things that are challenges that are not necessarily internal yourself working on the film, but external that you eventually like overcome or don't. And the pandemic was impossible to overcome, in terms of going into people's homes, in terms of going into the group homes where people live, to kind of see what their working space was during the pandemic. So yeah, I think that kind of access, not because people weren't willing, but because of the situation, was one of the biggest challenges, and the desire to go deeper and make really a feature.
Yeah. Megan, you can almost have a TV show if you would, like cooking show. I'm in the food shows. And Alfredo, yours seems like it'd almost be a feature. Austin, yours is short and sweet. Did you have any challenges?
I had it's more of a technical one, but Lori had a habit of explaining things while she was doing them, which is great for me. But like while I was editing, I was like, I gotta figure out how do I cut around this, because I would be getting a wide shot, and then she'll.
Well, that's why you included the shots of Madge, right? I remember the dog in there. Right on. Awesome.
Yeah, that's why.
Is there? We got time for one or two more questions, and you guys could add anything else I didn't ask you, but I'm on you, Austin. What do you hope people take away from your movie? What do you want audiences to leave with?
That grief is not an end all be all. Like, it may be hard, but we can move past it. And that's I think the heart of it.
Another favorite line, she said, don't let hardships keep you from accomplishing things, right?
Yeah.
Right on. Alfredo, what do you want audiences to come away with?
I I think just like a more nuanced understanding of like the humanity of all of us, I guess. At the end of the day, we're just humans who are trying to live our best lives. And I think if we can just remind ourselves that of that, like that would be enough. I think just being able to recognize that for a lot of us, we don't choose to be where we are. Like a lot of us just kind of are forced to move through the world. And I think recognizing the humanity in that, it would be the most important part.
Right on. Yeah. Megan, um, any parting words or anything you want audiences to take away?
Thanks. Yeah, I think I just want to touch back on, you said that it could almost be a series, and it's funny because it is part of a larger series of stories of culture. The second episode is about medicine, traditional medicine in Oaxaca, and the third is about music. And I think that there was something really important that Maestra Fe shared with me, that these things are with us when we're born, when we live, when we die. And it's really important to be able to kind of tap into those cultural reminders, whether it be through food, through medicine, through music, so that we can celebrate those parts of ourselves wherever we end up, whoever we're with community, with friends, with family. So I think that that's just a really beautiful thing that I want people to, takeaways, just go celebrate your favorite foods and share them with your friends.
Right on. And Natalia and Christian, same to you. Any parting words or what you want audiences to leave with?
I mean, for me, one of the things that I walked away with personally around these artists is so much of the time as filmmakers and artists, there are these, we need money to make our work, we need support, we need grants, we need to be in museums, we need to be in film festivals. And suddenly to see folks actually making things simply for the love of it, like really being inspired by the act of creation in the purest form, was an amazing experience. Because we all have those moments where we have doubt about where we are in our career and our work that we do. And just seeing these artists approach it in such a joyous way and with so much intention and attention was amazing. And then I think also, like, for me, I often see in documentaries, in media, just this utter doom and darkness. And I understand why. There are really intense things going on in the world. But I think so often in that narrative, we forget to celebrate places like Creativity Explored. Like, there are so many people putting so much energy to create this community, the artists, the instructors, the people who support their work. And I think that, it's not as sexy, but it's often forgotten. And I think that that's really sad for me because, as one of the artists says at the end of the film, wouldn't it be great? There are these empty buildings in San Francisco. If there are more spaces for artists like the C
Mm.
artists and more support. And I just think that that's like a really important thing for me as a maker to really like also, there needs to be light in the darkness. And I
Nice.
feel like Creativity Explored, the artists there capture that. And I want him to have a moment because
Right on. For sure. Well said.
I think that's
Yeah,
a great
follow
point.
that, Christian. Follow that.
All I would just say is that spending time with the Creativity Explored artists is such a great reminder of how important art is. And it's easy to forget that because we're kind of surrounded by art all the time, but for artists, not just CE artists, but for everybody, it's a form of expression, and it's a sense, it creates a sense of personal value and personal, because a lot of these artists are professional, they're contributing in a lot of ways to their own livelihood. But it is a great reminder that, art is important. It's, no matter what it is, it's an important form of expression. And not everybody has that, and too often it's a luxury, but it shouldn't be. So.
Yeah, yeah. You guys make me want to keep on talking to you about all your individual films. I got to ask one more question just because you reminded me of this, Christian. Have they seen your movie? Are they going to see your movie? Have they seen your movie?
Oh my God, it's funny because I wrote that down. I was like, I want to ask everybody, what has
Yeah,
anybody?
yeah. This goes to everybody. Have they seen?
That's the number one. That's
They actually they sent us notes because before we were done and locked the edit, we sent them like a a very fine cut, and they watched it together with the C instructors, so the folks who were in it, and they gave us notes. I mean, all of them were positive. They
Yeah.
really liked the film, but yeah, we did that with them.
What about the final version?
Oh, we just had a little screening.
Yeah, a sneak peek,
a sneak
and they
peek.
saw it.
And I gotta say, artists, they love seeing themselves on screen. There's no way around that.
A fun screening.
It was very fun.
Yeah, nice. Megan, Alfredo, Austin, did your subjects watch your films?
Yeah, I sent Lori a link so long ago. She didn't give me notes, so I don't know if she actually saw it, but I
Right,
would hope so.
right, right. Alfredo?
So for me, I'm coordinating a bunch of different screenings. So it's hard because a lot of the people left Tijuana, so now they're all scattered around the US. So my approach is I have this like impact campaign in which like I'm going to like the main hubs, so New York, LA, San Francisco, San Diego, Texas, somewhere in Texas, we're deciding where still, but to like tap into like the live screening. So like I'm strategically applying to festivals in those cities to bring the community together, but it might soon be streaming somewhere, so I'll probably be able to share the link with
Fair enough.
everyone more openly. But
Yeah.
my goal is to bring everyone to a live screening and have them be part of Q&As, which I did already in San Francisco once at a small community screening. Like someone from San Jose, who is now in San Jose, came all the way up, and Sacramento. And so anyway, this kind of the goal is like to tap back into the story. And
Well, hopefully, yeah, you can get more audience members at SF Indie Fest, the closing night. And Megan, have your subjects seen your film? Have you shared it with them?
Yeah, well, congratulations, Alfredo, on the streaming. That's huge. Yeah, so it's funny because this film was originally created for like a small community event to fulfill the grant that paid for it, to reactivate some community spaces. And then now it's kind of had this life of its own. It's gone to Mexico, it's gone to like, different places in the US. And the note I received back from Maestra Fe was like, I wish I wore a different shirt because I didn't realize so many people would see this movie. But I think she's really happy to see the work that she's done and the culture that she has worked so hard to celebrate and preserve, travel, all over the place, but also back to Mexico where the story comes from. So I think it's been, again, thank you for this opportunity to share it in San Francisco as well.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank all of you for sharing your films with us and making these sweet little movies. We really love them. That's all the time we have. I hope to meet you guys and see you guys at the closing night. And check out more great indie films and more great Q&As at sfindie.com. Bye, filmmakers. Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao.